Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Florida's new congressional map and breaking down how the new district lines will give the Republicans a giant advantage in this fall's midterm. So we're going to take a look at that in just a second. But first, I want to take a look at some of the other states on this map because there's been a couple of updates since the last time I talked about redistricting. The first big one that just happened about an hour ago, at least an hour before I recorded this, was that the Republican-drawn congressional maps for Kansas, which basically gave all of the districts a Republican partisan lean, was struck down by a court saying that it unfairly diluted Democratic and black voters. That was the ruling that just happened about an hour ago. So we'll see what really happens with this map. I think it still has to go to a higher court, similar to New York, which we're going to talk about now, but I think that it's possible that this map does get redrawn in a way that makes Kansas's 3rd congressional district a Democratic-leaning district rather than a Republican one, since they kind of sawed the district in half a bit to give all of the districts, of course, a Republican advantage. Now, the next state I want to talk about is New York, because once again, there's been another update regarding the New York congressional maps. Similar to what happened with the state of Kansas, the map was ruled unconstitutional twice by lower courts in the state. Now it has to go to the highest court in the state, the New York State Court of Appeals, which that is expected to be, I think, held tomorrow. We're supposed to have a verdict on that tomorrow, rather, to find out whether this map will stand for 2022 or not, or whether they're going to have to scramble to redraw it. Both New York and Kansas maps were sort of gerrymanders. They gave Republicans, and in this case with New York, the Democrats, a big advantage in the state to try and capture as many House seats as possible, because 2022 has really come down to a war of gerrymandering all across the country. And, a lot of states' maps have been strucken down previously for this. We've had North Carolina struck down, Maryland, Ohio was struck down at least twice, so a lot of states have been struck down this year because of, the way they were partisanly drawing their congressional maps. So, New York will have a decision on I'll probably have that video out by Wednesday if it does come Tuesday. And of course, Kansas. So now we have 4 outstanding maps, but one of the maps that is no longer outstanding is Florida. And Florida's map gives the Republicans a huge, huge advantage in the state, a 20-8 advantage. As of right now, the current congressional delegation in Florida is 16 Republicans to 11 Democrats. So 3 Democrats would presumably lose their seats, and you'd have Republicans gain the remaining 4, because remember, Florida got more congressional districts after the census, so it's not the same number as it was last time. So this is the old map that we have, or we could just pull it up here on 538. The old map gave the Democrats the advantage in about 8 of the congressional districts, and really, if you break it down even further, about 9 or 10 had leans for the Democrats. You had basically 10 seats rather, that had leans for the Democrats. So if you break it down, there was really about 9 to 10 seats that could potentially flip to the Democrats. Again, Republicans still have an advantage in the old map, but taking a look at the new map, a lot of power is consolidated. The most notable change is that the 5th district, which has incumbent Democrat Al Lawson, who's been in Congress since the 1990s, his district gets totally erased. It's chopped apart into basically across 4 districts here. Which basically puts him in the 4th district, which is R plus 15, which means he's not going to win re-election in 2022, or even a normal congressional year, he's not going to win his re-election. This basically dooms his re-election and his congressional career, honestly, because there's no neighboring blue districts he can really jump to that makes sense for him to run in. So that was chopped apart. Also, you could see by Orlando, the old map had about 3 districts that were, Democratic, 1 Democratic safe and 2 leaning. Those are consolidated now into 2 safe Democratic districts, and basically making Stephanie Murphy's district an R plus 14. Again, destroying her congressional career. She's going to be, she's not going to win re-election in a district that red. Also, again, Tampa, another thing too, you have a swing district and you have a likely Democratic district. The likely Democratic district is just spread further and moved around a bit so that the 13th gets redder. These districts around it get a little bit bluer, but it consolidates power. It consolidates the Republicans' ability to win districts in this area. And then also some minor changes down here by Miami, but the main changes are really, by Jacksonville, Tallahassee, the Orlando area, and Tampa Bay. which really make the districts way less competitive than they were the last time around. Now, like I said before, Florida, Florida's old map had a 16-11 advantage for Republicans. Before the 2020 elections, back in the 2018 midterms, it was even smaller than that. So Florida was a lot more evenly represented than it is today. And back in 2020, Florida only went to Donald Trump by 51.2% to Joe Biden's basically 48% of the vote. And, you have a state that, votes slightly Republican, I guess. Republicans win the state, but by, lean margins, basically. Lean or even tilt sometimes. Yet you have a congressional delegation. That's going to go 20-8, which is a huge gerrymander. That's on par with states like New York and Maryland and Illinois. So, and obviously, honestly, a bit more dramatic because those states at least are safe blue, not defending, their maps at all. But Florida is basically a 50-50 state that gives the Republicans basically 70% of all the representation in Congress. So that's a dramatic shift in power from what it was previously. Now, if we go back to the old House elections again, now some of the Democrats did overperform their districts. For instance, you had Stephanie Murphy win by about 12 points in a D+4 district. You had Florida's 9th go 56-44, which I believe that one was only D+. That was a D+4 rather. Stephanie Murphy's was D+5. And of course, you have Charlie Crist, who's running for governor right now. He's actually not running for re-election in the House. So either way, this district would have been competitive. But now that it's been drawn in such a way that it's, effectively a safe Republican district almost, he probably would be smart not to run for re-election. Now, will this map actually stand, though? Will this survive any appeals? Now, the main appeal, of course, is on the ground of the Voting Rights Act, since Florida's 5th district is a majority black district. It's also a majority Democratic district as well. So, it could be argued that it's diluting political representation, and it's also disenfranchising black voters. That's the charge that people that appeal, voting rights organizations, are going to make about this new gerrymander. And we'll see what actually happens. A lot of people have been saying that they're not too optimistic about this map being thrown out. But I will say again that a lot of maps this cycle have been tossed out. North Carolina again, Ohio, possibly New York, hopefully New York, honestly. You have Kansas, more states than I think in previous cycles. These maps have been taken down because a lot of people are, erring on the side of fairness, which I think is ultimately a good thing. So again, going back to Florida's congressional districts, we can go back to previous Florida elections. Ron DeSantis, the governor who actually is spearheading these new maps, because again, the main story behind this was the legislature was going to pass, maps like this, for example, which were much less gerrymandered than the maps being proposed. They had a lot more competitive seats that Republicans, could theoretically win. Again, it puts Charlie Crist in an R+2 instead of R+1, makes this district R+3. So not really dramatic changes. It still consolidates Orlando, but it still keeps Al Lawson's district the 15th. So if this map, the current map, gets struck down, one of these proposals might come back because it still gives the Republicans a decent advantage, more of an advantage than they had last time, but it also does consolidate more safe Democratic districts, or at least safe and likely Democratic districts, than the old map does. These leans kind of change a bit. So ultimately, again, whether this map gets struck down is still up in the air. Some people say it's not likely because of the court makeups, but again, as we're seeing in other states like Kansas, like possibly New York, a lot of judges are bucking their own party on the side of the law and, with their state's respective constitutions. So again, we go back to just 2018, for instance. DeSantis only won his election by 0.4%, which is crazy. I mean, Florida bucked the midterm trend back in 2018, but 0.4% would make all the difference in policy around the entire country. And I'm not just talking about gerrymandering, I just mean in general, because Ron DeSantis has become a giant name in Republican politics and a likely presidential contender, whether it be 2024 or 2028. And just 0.4% of the vote could have changed all of that. You know, I don't know if Andrew Gillum would have been a Democratic star the way Ron DeSantis is, but it would be really interesting, honestly, to ponder how that would have turned out. But Florida itself, this was a really, really, really close race. And, DeSantis isn't expected to get a whole lot of resistance this time around. So Florida has changed dramatically. And I think back in 2018, this was when I really kind of knew that Florida was going to go red in 2020. All of these other states that had moved to the left. Obviously, Florida did very slightly. But the fact that a Republican still won in 2018 really goes to show you how red Florida is trending. Now, Florida as a whole, again, is not a super, super red state. We looked at the numbers before, 51 to 48. Now, this could change in coming elections, but Florida is still roughly a 50-50 state. And, these maps obviously really don't do it much justice. So we'll be covering, again, some redistricting probably on Wednesday when we get the New York decision, and maybe one last time when we get all the maps, because I know I've hammered this point home a lot. I've been covering it a lot, but I think it's pertinent to really what's going on ahead of the midterms. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I put out. And again, as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.